on our website.
All right, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order this morning.
Yeah.
Our first item is the Home Rule Advisory Group revised membership roster. Philip, there you go.
Yeah, this is a very fast item. Hopefully, it's just looking for committee concurrence for Dr. Joseph Liu to reappoint his representative to the Home Rule Advisory Group, Jackie Ferreira. Routine item.
Move it, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion. Get a second.
You need a second?
Jody, do you want a second? Home Rule
I'll
Advisory.
second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Yep, sorry. We need a roll call vote. Go ahead.
Okay, Mayor McCallum? Mayor McCallum?
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes.
Supervisor Nelson?
Yes.
Supervisor Rutherford? Councilmember Benoit?
Aye. All right, on to item 2. Amend BACT guidelines and approve the charter for the BACT Scientific Review Committee.
Yes.
Start ahead.
Hi. Good morning and good morning, committee members. There it is. Okay, thank you. Okay, here it is. This item is to amend the best available control technologies guidelines and approve a charter for the BACT Scientific Review Committee. By way of background, BACT is required during the permit evaluation of new, relocated, or modified equipment that has the potential to increase emissions. The district, under Rule 1303, is required to periodically publish the guidelines whenever updates are done to the guidelines or new BACT requirements are being proposed. The guidelines were first published back in 1987. For major sources, for the implementation of the Clean Air Act, the guideline has the federal requirement of LAIR implemented through the BACT process. For minor sources, BACT is determined in accordance with the Health and Safety Code of the state that has cost in addition to other factors. This report is a summary of our proposed updates to the guidelines to make the guidelines consistent with current requirements. No new or more stringent requirements are being proposed, just making the guidelines consistent with the current requirements. This is a quick definition of, in accordance with the Health and Safety Code and the Reg 13 of BACT. BACT is technology has been achieved in practice. Somebody has installed a piece of equipment that achieves a certain amount of emissions reductions. It's a SIP approved emission limit, such as a rule, or similarly to the AQMD for non-major sources, is a technology that is feasible and also cost-effective to be implemented as BACT. This provides an overview of the current format of the guidelines and made up of 5 parts. Overview, which provides a summary and introduction to the guidelines. Parts A and B, which deal with major source, BACT, policy and determinations, and parts C and D, which address the minor source BACT determinations. Back in 1995, in order to increase the public participation of the BACT update process, the BACT Scientific Review Committee was established with the purpose of providing comment and input into the BACT guidelines whenever we would update the determinations or update the guidelines. The committee is made up of primarily industry groups, government agencies, trade organizations, academia, and consultants. It meets periodically whenever we are updating the guidelines. In fact, for this proposed update of the guidelines, we met with the committee in a public meeting in May of this year, where the proposed updates were presented to the committee. 30 days were allowed for comment period. We received 8 comment letters, in addition by 8 separate SRC members that totaled over 100 individual comments and suggested edits to the guidelines. Most of those edits were included into the current proposed guidelines. Again, this proposed update, the guidelines have not been updated for some time, so we felt it's definitely needed to be updated. It's touching on all 5 parts of the guidelines, in addition to 2 new parts to address the new federal greenhouse gas BACT requirements. Again, I'm emphasizing the fact that this update is intended to just reflect current requirements. We're not proposing new, more stringent requirements to what's currently being required. Therefore, it meets any criteria for minor source BACT under the state law. This is, I don't want to go through every single item, but here, this slide summarizes our updates to clarify and update the overview section of the guidelines. As you can see, some of these updates are, for example, to update the map, to update some of the requirements that are currently in effect. Similarly, for chapters 4 and 5 of the overview, we're adding a background on the role of the SRC, which is currently available online, but we felt it needed to be added to the guidelines also. For the major source, parts A and B, again, similarly, we're updating the policy with current policy and requirements. For part B, which is the determinations for LARE, lowest achieved emission rate that applies to major sources, we are proposing flare oil gas production flares and the engines which have been permitted, which have been achieved in practice in accordance with LARE, operating for 6 months or more in compliance. Minor sources, we're updating the Part C policy and procedures, be consistent with the current ATCM, state requirements, and AQMD rules. To Chapter 2, similar thing. Part D of the guidelines is the BACT determinations for minor sources. All these BACT determinations, we're just updating them and adding text that updates the requirements that reflects the ATCM and AQMD rules and regulations. Again, so I'd like to emphasize that fact that we're not adding any more stringent parts to Part D, which would be subject to state law for us to go through an intensive process of cost effectiveness, reliability, and so forth. Again, this is Part E that we're adding to address the new federal requirements for greenhouse gases and the applicability of it. Part F, similar to parts B and C of the guidelines, would be a section that would publish new determinations. We work very closely with engineering whenever new major sources are permitted that have achieved or established greenhouse gas BACT. We would review that information and propose it for future additions to the guidelines. Guidelines contains a list of abbreviations and index that was updated. For example, greenhouse gases was not part of the index. We added that in addition to other new terms. One thing we're adding, the BACT Scientific Review Committee, when it was established, it had a set of operational guidelines, but it was never really formalized in the form of a charter. This charter necessarily reflects what the original intent of the BACT SRC was, and codifies it in a charter to specify the goals, objectives, and membership qualifications and so forth of the committee. And finally, staff recommends that the committee determine that the proposed amendments to the guidelines are exempt from CEQA, approve the proposed BACT guidelines, and approve the proposed charter for the BACT Scientific Review Committee that details the role of memberships of the BACT Scientific Review Committee, which provides advice and input to the SCAQMD staff on proposed new and more stringent BACT determinations and amendments to the BACT guidelines. That concludes my presentation.
All right. Public comment?
Morning. My name is David Rothbart. I'm representing the Southern California Alliance of Public Building Treatment Works, and I'm a member of the SRC. A number of members of the SRC couldn't be here today and said please provide comments on their behalf as well, which is Gary Rubenstein and Carl Laney. Although not a member of the SRC, Rita Loof also is not able to be here. I wanted to relay their impression of the BACT guidelines and what they'd like to have done. Just as a matter of review, the guidelines haven't been updated in about 10 years. The SRC has not met in about the same time frame. We've had one meeting with the SRC on May 11th. All the members, I could say with good faith, I think all the members were in the impression that we would have an opportunity to review the updated draft guidelines to provide feedback to make sure our comments are incorporated. We were not afforded that opportunity. We did not know about this item going to stationary until last week. And the actual document that's been passed out here was not even available for our review until this Wednesday. so we have very little time to review the document. In a cursory review in 2 days, we do have some questions about how Tier 4 engines would be used and electrification provisions. It may be something that could be worked out very quickly, but there's issues that we think should be brought back to the SRC to make sure we're all on the same page. A lot of issues associated with BACT, I would say, can help streamline permits. The next item's going to be talking about permit streamlining. And as someone who tries to get permits through South Coast, understanding BACT and having clear BACT guidelines will help, and a little bit more effort as far as communicating between the permit writers, enforcement, and the BACT team might help that effort. So there's a lot of things like that are practical feedback that SRC would like to provide to staff. And if you could direct staff to have another meeting with the SRC, bring this back to the SRC before it comes back to stationary, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. The chair. Everybody scoot down, Trinity.
Good morning, Kurt Coleman, Executive Director of the Southern California Air Quality Alliance. I would just like to sort of short tail on what David said. I got an email from one of my members this morning asking what's the rush on this.
Chair for you now.
Oh, thank you. That's,
Sorry, I don't know why we didn't do that for the first speaker. Sorry about that.
that's one way to keep people at 3 minutes.
Well, yeah. I hope we also gotten to that point where we can't stand for it, but go ahead, yeah.
And as he said, we had the one meeting in May, and as I review the district's website on the function of the Scientific Review Committee, at least it implies that if there are issues, comments submitted and that staff has to review, that they would bring them back for further discussion at a follow-up meeting. So we would really appreciate one more meeting just for a matter of process. Part of the issue here is that there have been so many things we've had to deal with in the last month and a half or so between the NOx reclaim and the AQMP. And you see the size of the package over there for this item. It's probably almost an inch thick. So we would really appreciate one more meeting of the Scientific Review Committee meeting, just so if there are issues, we can get them resolved, and at least an understanding of what are in the guidelines as revised by staff. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, is there any time sensitivity on this?
Staff, is there any time sensitivity?
No, just the need to have an updated document online, but we can work with the committee.
However, may I add, there hasn't been a substantive content issue brought before the staff, so it's more of a process. So, I think the differentiation is all the stakeholders have been involved in the AQMP process, where there's quite a bit of vetting and back and forth between staff and a final document. The SRC is intended to provide input to a guideline. It's not a regulatory process. We're providing guidance to permitting. And so the typical process, we get input from the SRC, we incorporate those changes to the best extent we can, we bring it before stationary source, and then it goes before the board. So we're not doing anything differently, except for it's not the typical regulatory process that's been ongoing for the AQMP.
Hi, good morning. My name is Bill Lamar. I'm the Executive Director of the California Small Business Alliance. And as a government agency, process is everything. You should know that. Like the two speakers before me, I have some concerns why staff is so intent on moving this forward to the SRC and then to the governing board in early October without giving granting the Scientific Review Board committee members like myself another opportunity to weigh in on the comments. I have 7 pages of emails between staff and other committee members and myself over this issue, and as all we're asking is for clarification on some of the comments, some of these letters and some of these comments I haven't seen before just the other day in this exchange of emails. Staff does plan, in one of these emails, staff plans to bring the BACT guidelines back for review by the SRC after the October 26th board meeting. And all I'm saying is, why not before? You know, so maybe we could not have that meeting after the governing board meeting, if we can resolve whatever questions exist beforehand. So I would urge you to ask staff or direct staff to convene the SRC one more time. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask, Dr. Miyasato spoke to the issue of substantive comments. And Dr. Miyasato, if you could just sort of identify maybe what the substantive issues are that are in question that perhaps the SRC would like to review, and where staff is with regards to those particular issues?
The only issue that we've heard is a concern about recognition of Tier 4 final for these portable diesel generators. We don't believe, we are confident that we're consistent with the state law, and that's something that we can easily discuss with the folks that have concerns about it. I think the main issue here is that the SRC is not an approving body. It's a scientific review committee that provides input to staff on the guidelines. I've directed staff to work with any of the members up until the time where the board package becomes final, so if there are comments that we can incorporate, we could do that. And so I would suggest as an option, we could continue to meet, and if there are major issues, we would just end up pulling the item at the board meeting. But so far, there haven't been substantive issues with respect to the guidelines that would say, you know, we're at different ends of the spectrum.
So, Mr. Chairman, staff's willing to continue to meet with the various representatives, and then if there are any issues, we could pull that item for the full governing board meeting.
Any other public comments?
Hi, Sue Gordon from Westbrook. I would just like to reiterate what the others have said too. We'd like a little bit more time. We did participate. We appreciate that. We think the process is going well, but I think there are still a lot of things to take a look at and review. So I would appreciate just one more meeting. Thank you.
So again, what's the time constraint on this? Why couldn't we wait and have one more meeting and then bring it back?
Well, I think we can have the additional meeting. I think the challenge that we have is we're trying to, in essence, bring things current so that we can move forward in the permit aspects that you'll hear shortly about. This helps feed into that. I think there is the opportunity, as Dr. Miyasato said, to resolve this before the governing board meeting. And if there isn't, then we'll pull the item and we'll still meet with the group. But I think, as Dr. Miyasato points out, the Scientific Review Committee provides input. It's not the decisional authority. Sure. And you know, again, I'll sort of use an EPA example where an establishment of an ozone standard, SRC would review that and make recommendations, and then staff makes the decisions. In this particular case, staff believes that the substantive issues are being addressed, but in an abundance of transparency, staff is saying we'll continue to meet with this group, and if necessary, we can pull the item to the next board meeting. So I think we have a resolution moving forward. And if the advisory committee meeting members can meet either by telephone or in person, I think, again, we can resolve these issues.
So, well, I'd make that motion that the SRC meet once again with our staff people, that you have it remain on the board agenda for October, but it will be pulled in the event that the issues aren't resolved. And for members in the audience who are concerned, I would advise you to please let us know if the issues aren't resolved, Bill and David, so that we will know that that has to be pulled off of the agenda. I'm assuming staff's going to be working with you and will let us know as well. So, but you know, it's important that we get this right, because it does tie in with permitting, and we want the BACT guidelines to be well coordinated with permitting, and everybody in the industry to understand what is required. So I think it's important that that process is done correctly.
I'll second the motion.
All right. Any other comments? Sean?
No, thank you.
Got a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and roll call, please.
Mayor McCowan,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Supervisor Nelson,
Yes?
Councilmember Benoit.
Yes.
I do have one question though.
Uh-huh.
On the back, at the time of permitting, can you require a more stringent back than at the time the application is submitted?
It depends, it's a major or minor source. For a major source is at the time the permit is issued. For a minor source is at the time permit is deemed complete. That's when BACT is determined in the permitting process.
All right. On to our next item, the permit backlog reduction plan. Lockie.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members of the committee. I've spent my last 2 months preparing this draft action plan. As you know, we have a permit backlog that has been accumulating for the last several years. So, and finally, the draft action plan is completed. So our objectives with this plan is to eliminate this backlog as expeditiously as possible, ensure the timely issuance of permits, improve our transparency and our customer service. And we want to do all these while we are keeping the environment whole, so no shortcuts. So the plan that we are presenting today identifies a series of measures, both immediate action as well as long-term measures that seek to optimize our operational efficiency, as well as enhance the utilization of our existing resources. It's an aggressive plan, but it's a realistic plan, and it's intended to be a roadmap to our staff. And we are going to keep it as a living document because our expectation is some of the measures that we identify will work great and we'll continue implementing those, and some of them perhaps won't work as well. And we are going to be keeping an open mind to replace and augment them with new, fresh ideas as we go along. So it reflects some of our brainstorming efforts among our staff, our stakeholders, but we do intend to continue our dialogue with our stakeholders between now and the October board meeting, and even beyond, and keep soliciting new ideas. So just a few words about our permitting process. We have a two-step permitting process. So if you are an applicant, you submit an application, we review your application, whether your equipment meets our rules and regulation, and if it does, we issue a permit to construct. And this process is supposed to take 180 days, no more than 180 days. There are some exceptions to the law, to the rule. For instance, if it's a complicated equipment that will necessitate CEQA analysis, HRA analysis, the clock doesn't start up until those elements are completed. So once the applicant receives his permit to construct, has 1 year to install his equipment, fine-tune his equipment, run a source results to us, we review those results, and if everything is okay, we issue the permit to operate. Often, the applicant will ask for extensions because it takes longer than a year sometimes to procure and install the equipment, and we offer those on a case-by-case basis. We have a series of other permit types that, in the interest of time, I'm not going to get, but I want you to know that there are some other even more complicated permits, such as the Title V and reclaimed facility type of permits, rather than equipment-based permits, where EPA gets involved in the review and commenting process that has the tendency to further elongate the process. On the bright side, we have some registration, certification, and filing programs that are akin to the over-the-counter permits that we can issue quite rapidly, a lot faster than the traditional permitting system. And the reason why I'm listing those out there is we'd like to see whether we can push additional equipment into those programs as we move along with the permit streamlining efforts. So a couple of months ago, approximately, Mr. Nastri communicated with you about the size of our pending application or open permit application, and we provided that detail by age. And essentially, it was what is being reflected in this bar chart here. We have 7,300 open permit applications. Some of them are fresh, less than 6 months, 2,500 of them. But the rest of them are a lot older, 1 year old, 2 year old, 3, 4 plus, 5 plus years old. And while for some applications, there is some reason why they may be 4 or 5 years old. For instance, some of the power plant applications that are multi-year efforts. Normally it will take a lot longer than 6 months to process those permits. But for many of them, we don't have any excuses and they need to disappear from that column. So while this particular bar chart is quite revealing, it doesn't quite tell us in terms of how we should be prioritizing our efforts. So we looked at the same 7,300 applications from a different angle, and I'm summarizing it here on this slide. So we tried to figure out, okay, what fraction of those reflect permits to construct, which can act as temporary permits to operate, which fraction of that bar chart is for pending permits to operate, and what have you. And then we reflected the appropriate timeframes associated with each of the slices of the bar chart. And we tried to ascertain what fraction of it reflects the true backlog versus what fraction of it reflects the true working inventory. And the pie chart on top, which reflects 51% of the pending applications, reflects the backlog. It's roughly 3,700 permit applications, and it offers you the delineation, and the rest of it is obviously, the working inventory. Now, even though we are directing our staff to expeditiously eliminate the backlog, we are making sure that we are not taking our eyes away from the working inventory as well, because those reflect the brand new applications that small businesses, it can be large businesses as well, are waiting for to initiate their businesses. So while we are making good progress in eliminating the backlog, we don't want the working inventory to go by the wayside. So we are going to be working on both fronts. So what are some of the key hurdles or bottlenecks preventing us from expeditiously issuing those permits? I'm listing some of those here. I'm not going to go through all of them because of, in the interest of time. And we're not presenting those as excuses, but as we try to prioritize our future actions, it's good to know what are some of the regulatory hurdles versus the non-regulatory hurdles. What fraction of them we have full control over versus not. So for instance, the large projects, the power plant projects that we talked about, the ones that will necessitate SEQA analysis, health risk assessments, modeling analysis where the applicant has to go out and hire an independent consultant, complete the study, submit the study for us for review, those clearly will elongate the process beyond that 6-month time frame or 180-day time frame. We talked about the BACT and layer analysis. Clearly, if those have to be done, it has the tendency to elongate the process. However, there are some other aspects. For instance, we have the vacancy rates, we have the inadequate computer systems, we have the processing efficiencies that we, to some extent, have control over, and perhaps this action plan attempts to address and streamline. So how big is the challenge? So what I'm trying to do here in this slide, I'm presenting basically the 7,300 at the bottom of the slide, the 7,300 pending applications that we have. And we said roughly 50% reflect the backlog. In any given year, we are receiving 6,000 applications, and we issue 7,700 permits. And this pending application bar chart is basically a snapshot in time that reflects the difference of those two. So assuming that we are keeping the same workflow, and by the way, those 7,700 permits have been issued by roughly 7,980 engineers, so it translates to roughly 100 permits per engineer per year. So if we are continuing with the same workflow, in order to eliminate the additional 3,700 permits, say in 1 year, we need to improve our processing capacity by 50%. If we want to eliminate them in 2 years, we'll still have to improve our permit processing capacity by 25%. I don't know how many governments you know that they improve their processing capacity in a roughly short time in 25 to 50%, but these are the type of targets that we are shooting for over here with this effort. And the action plan was designed around those targets, and essentially we need to improve, we need to make major strides in improving both our permit processing capacity and our permit processing efficiency. They are the two sides of the same coin. We cannot favor one over the other. We need to work on both fronts, and basically the action plan and the strategies that are included in the action plan seeks to achieve that task. I'm just going to give you a few examples of what we are including in terms of improving production capacity. Active management and supervision is at the very top. That will pay dividends. It started already paying dividends. I'll share with you some of the results. Filling some of our high vacancy rates. Traditionally, we have been nursing 20+% vacancy rates that has contributed over the years to this backlog. Thanks to Mr. Nastry's arrival, we managed to reduce this down to 8%. That will definitely pay dividends. Training is something that will help us in bringing those new engineers up to speed faster, which typically takes a couple of years to bring them up to speed and have them fire in all 8 cylinders. Definitely, we're going to be asking our workforce to extend their 40-hour work week and add some additional hours during the weekend. We are going to try to deploy internal engineers working for other departments with some permit processing experience to help us out with the work backlog reduction effort. And as a last resort, we may also be interested in entertaining the idea of hiring temporary engineers and or permanent engineers, and certainly the dugout option, which is something that it's an idea that we exercised some 10, 15 years ago that has paid some dividends. It's not the most popular option, but nevertheless, since we have some experience with it, I've listed it as part of our improvement, production capacity improvement efforts. Efficiency improvement efforts, which is by far equally, perhaps even more important than the capacity improvement efforts. And I'm not going to go through all of them. Definitely better interdepartmental coordination, improved training, revisiting outdated policies and rules will pay huge dividends in improving, in debottlenecking our process. We have the two-step permit process. Can we reduce the two-step down to one step? We won't be able to do it for the very complicated permit applications or processes, but perhaps we have a chance for the simpler applications, and we want to explore that option. But the silver lining over here, or if there is any silver bullet, is the automation. It's the bullet at the very middle of our slide there. We want to develop templates, computer programs that assist the engineers in processing those permits faster, where they can insert input parameters, and the computer program will do the work, the engineering analysis, and will spit out basically the permit limits and some of the conditions. We want to develop electronic tools, and ultimately, we want to graduate to electronic online permitting, where we don't have just our engineers do the data insertion, but we have the applicant do some of the work, and if possible, get the permit online with very little interference from our internal staff. Mr. Nastry and I and Ms. Supervisor Rutherford had the opportunity to go up north and meet with our counterparts in the Bay Area, who spent many, many years and millions of dollars and managed to develop a system like that for their very simple permits. And the good news is they're willing to share this with us. So our counterparts, my colleagues at the information management, they are trying to figure out to what extent we can import that system into our computer system, because it's not an automatic thing to do. Regardless, we are also working on our own online tools And this is something that will help us embrace the 21st century and ultimately allow us to make whatever gain we score sustainable. So let me go to the next one. We have a number of customer service and transparency improvement measures. We want to develop some online tracking tools, such as the one, the visual tool that we have on the slide, that will allow you to see how, and the public see how well we are doing in terms of reducing the backlog. We also want to develop tools that will allow the applicant to see where their permit is at any given time in the system. In terms of implementation, we are going to be developing multiple ad hoc teams to work on the various aspects of the plan to ensure its timely implementation, and the oversight will be at the DO, CO, and EO level. We have Gantt charts that spell out the timeframes and the milestones in the plan, and we also worked on 2 different scenarios that will allow us to cost out and figure out the timing involved associated with this effort. The first scenario was the 2-year effort that will necessitate us to improve our efficiency by 25% for both years. And this particular scenario is relying on the efficiency measures, on the enhanced supervision and management, and relies only on our existing staff. Working our staff a little bit longer with some OT. This will cost us approximately $2.2 million a year, or $4.4 million for 2 years. And the automation efforts will be, in addition to this, it's going to be approximately $1 million per year for 5 years. But with this effort, we'll be able, over the 8 quarters, the next 8 quarters, to bring the backlog down to, by 100%, down to the black line there. We also had the what-if scenario. Can we do it even faster? So we try to see whether we can squeeze that time frame down to 1 year. So that scenario, which is our second scenario, relies on all the improvements that we are including on scenario 1. But in order to hit those targets, we'll need additional sets of eyes, brains, to help us out with the permit processing. And we'll be relying on hiring on a temporary basis and some permanent basis additional engineers. And it's that cost associated with that effort that will allow us to hit those targets, and it will cost us close to $12 million plus the automation costs. Now, in theory, we can accomplish this in 4 months, but because there is some administrative lag time in hiring those additional and training those additional engineers, in actuality, we'll get to the finish line probably in 15 plus months. So it allows us to get a few months, but at a pretty high price tag. So we think the very first scenario is by far the most cost-effective one. So to conclude, this action plan is a very aggressive but realistic plan that will allow us to eliminate this backlog in 1 or 2 years, depending on the scenario of choice. The time frames and the cost are strongly dependent on how well we are going to do with our efficiency measures, and the automation ideas that we have and moving forward with those is a must if we want to make those gains that we are going to achieve sustainable over the long term, because I'm afraid, if we want to go with those, we are going to see the backlogs again spiking 3-4 years down the road. We are committed to be coming back to this committee and offering quarterly status reports. We've already set those many of those elements of the plan in implementation, and we have some early results that I would like to share with you here. They're very encouraging. We started with 7,300 permits at the end of June. At the end of August, we are already 14% down. We were able to eliminate more than 1,000 pending open applications from our backlog. And I'll stop there.
Comments, questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. How many engineers do we have?
79, and we recently hired 6 new engineers.
And what's the tenure, average tenure?
We have pretty long longevity. People stick around for a long time.
Maybe that, we need to, just a suggestion, we need to go out actively pursuing more younger engineers to come in and get trained, because it seems to me that the older workforce is eventually gonna be retiring. And maybe some of them are already retired, and maybe that's why we have backlog.
One of the tremendous challenges that this organization has is the aging of the workforce. And as a result of that, one of the things that Jill Wynot has been working on is succession planning. So it's that very issue. And if you like, perhaps, Jill, you can say a few words about your efforts toward that.
Basically, what we've been concentrating on is identifying employees that are likely to retire in 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 5, or are gonna be here for probably 5 years or longer, because we do have a workforce that tends to stay for quite some time. So each of the executives in charge of the teams has already identified those folks. We're now in the process of identifying potential successors for moving up into vacant positions. And for positions like engineers and inspectors, we're gonna do a much better job with the recruitments and not wait until we have 10 vacancies to start a recruitment. We're gonna try and have an active list that we can hire from, so as soon as a vacancy occurs, we can fill it with somebody who's qualified. So we're stepping that up. Once we identify potential people to move up in the organization, for anybody that's not in management, we're gonna identify types of training materials or classes or experiences that we can offer across the board. So anyone that's interested in potentially moving from a line position to supervisory position or into a management position will have the opportunity for those training exercises and experiences. For folks that are in the management and executive tracks, we can tailor things a little bit more individually to one or more individuals that would be likely to move up. So that's a substantial effort that we're working on. It's gonna help with not just the permit reduction, but it'll help in all aspects in engineering and inspections, in our lab, because we do have a workforce that about 50% of the workforce could potentially retire now or in the very near future. And it was surprising to me how many employees we have that are over 60, 65, 75, and even we have a few that are in their octogenarian status. So just a couple. So, but it's great. We also are trying to make sure we have programs where we don't lose that history as some of these people walk out the door. So we're trying to make sure that we have mentoring and appropriate documentation. So things like getting this permit manual guidelines updated are really important so that we can share that institutional knowledge.
Well, bringing young engineers on as a temporary basis is a good way of building potential employees, and as people retire, hiring them full time. But getting that, getting those in, there's a lot of young people out there who need jobs, a lot of young engineers that don't have them.
Your comment is spot on. I mean, bringing those early on before the retirements take place and cross-pollinating and allow that knowledge to transfer to take effect is critical. In the past, we didn't do as good of a job, and we pay, for it, so to the extent we can alter our procedures and catalyze that process will pay dividends.
Yeah, and there's benefit of having new, fresh, young blood in there to
Right.
invigorate the older people.
I would just add, Mayor, that the challenge as an environmental organization that we and other agencies have is that people are very passionate and want to stay in this job. And oftentimes the challenge is when you have sort of a workforce that's been entrenched a long time, and you have a younger workforce that comes in, you have sort of generational challenges. So one of the other issues that we're working on is actually recruitment and retention, so that we can make sure that as we bring in these young engineers and scientists and specialists, that they're motivated to stay. They don't want to have to necessarily wait for a seniority-based system. So the importance of the retention and the recruitment is concurrent with the succession planning, and we're trying to address all those issues.
Good.
Thank you.
I just want to mention also, our budget is based on an overall vacancy rate of 8%, and we've been way higher than that, but we're trying to fill all of these critical vacancies and still maintain an overall 8% vacancy rate, so our budget stays in balance.
Mr. Chair. On the automation that you're planning,
Yes.
and you have estimate of $1 million a year.
Right.
Are you hiring outside consultants to come in and work on a automated system for permit applications? Or are you gonna rely only on the Bay Area?
Well, we're actually looking at a number of different options. So the Bay Area, who actually embarked on a 10-year program and have spent $15 million thus far on upgrading their system, has graciously offered to provide assistance to us. I think, their board obviously has some concerns about all their investments and would like to see some type of perhaps consideration of that, and I think that's something that's probably fair.
Like a thank you letter?
Maybe a little bit more than a thank you letter, maybe a thank you letter with a check. But along those lines, what we're trying to do is, they have a different platform, they have a different means of doing it. And the challenge is, can we actually incorporate their system? We've built up a lot of infrastructure, and so right now we're in the process, and Chris is actually here. I was going to look for Chris and say, Chris, maybe you can sort of explain the things that we're looking at with regards to Bay Area's platform, our platform, the investment that we've made, and the coordination that's going on between engineering and IM.
Right, we've talked to them about their system and the possible differences between theirs and ours. And so they probably have a much different database structure than we have. So while they have their permitting and compliance system within theirs, we gotta make sure that if we use their system and we have to hook in the hearing board and our finance system and things like that, there's a lot of other hook points that need to go into implementing somebody else's system. That's doable. If it makes sense to use a lot of their systems, we gotta worry about a lot of the hooks into the other systems and take care of all those I's and dot all the I's and cross the T's, which if we use our system and build upon our system, it's already built with that in mind that our systems are already integrated. So we're looking at all those different features to see if it makes sense to go with theirs, or if we can pull pieces out of theirs and modify them a little bit to use for us, or go down a path where we're going already.
I think one of the most significant aspects is they're really moving toward a cloud-based system.
Right.
And that's something that, I know we're considering. And their view on that, and I was somewhat skeptical of that at first, was, by using Microsoft-based servers or other servers such as those, they feel they actually have much greater security because you have a much larger firm that's really focused on that. So that's, I think, a very key consideration that we're looking into as well.
So I think it would be advisable, because we're doing a lot with our website right now.
Right. Yes.
I think it might be advisable to put out an RFP for somebody to do this kind of a system for us. The Bay Area system has been around for a while and may be outdated at this point. And the platform problems could be pretty extensive. We could spend a lot of money looking at their system when it would be better for us to start from scratch with our system. But an RFP would tell you what those costs are going to be, and you could at least make some comparisons.
And that's one of the things that we recommended to Lockheed when we look at this, both of our systems, is to hire an outside firm with expertise that can look at them both objectively and give us input into that.
And one lesson that we learned out of the Bay Area experience is don't go for the whole 9 yards. Start small, and work batch ways, and learn from your past mistakes, and probably that's what we are going to do. But the important message is, at least initially, we'll have to work on 2 parallel paths up until the dust settles as to whether we can fully incorporate, or in some fashion we can incorporate the Bay Area system. And at the end of that process, we'll know whether we are going this way or that way, but we don't want to lose any time. We want to work on a parallel path because time is of the essence here.
Any public comment on this?
Hi, good morning. I'm Bill Lamar, Executive Director of the California Small Business Alliance. Maybe one of the things you ought to consider is tying permit engineers' compensation to the number of permits that they process, and their performance evaluations. That might help a little bit. On a little more serious note, what I commend staff, really do, and their direction by the board to get into this issue of permit backlog. I know my memory escapes me, but I think around 10 years or so ago, we had a similar backlog under the old management, and it seemed to take forever to get back out of there, and now we're back in it again. One of the things that concerns me about this, and it's no reflection on Lockheed, on this permit backlog, the 7,348, is how many of these permit applications, how many of these requests for permit paid for the expediting fee. At present, I'm doing a couple of case studies for the ad hoc committee on large compliance investments and regulatory certainty. And they're small businesses, and I have one small business here who paid that expediting fee, and took them 7 months to get a permit. It's particularly tough on a small business because they can't use, because
Where are we going?
because many of them don't own the properties or the buildings that they operate out of, and they pay lease to landlords for a building that they can't really legally utilize. And so I would like to see at some future time how many of these permits were permit requests paid the expedite, the 50% extra to have their permit issued in a timely manner. There may be some refunds due those people. So those are some of the issues. I'm glad to be a part of the permit expediting task force, and I look forward, like everybody, to see this reduced so that we can get on with business as usual. Thank you.
Good morning, Kurt Coleman, Southern California Air Quality Alliance. The short version of my remarks is thank you. The longer version is I think I've been beating the drum on this for 6-7 years now, coming before the board at budget time and supporting the board's budget and saying it's critical that we have engineering positions filled and that expedited permit processing be made a priority. And it's just really gratifying to see in a few short months since Lockheed's come in to come up with a comprehensive plan that could have been developed years ago but wasn't. And we're here to help Lockheed and Wayne implement that and provide suggestions. But I'm just very impressed and gratified at the speed and the comprehensiveness of this proposal, and appreciate all the work. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just add, Mr. Chairman, that this effort has been ground up, top down. Engineering, Lockheed staff, management, Jill, all the other assistant DEOs and DEOs have all worked hard to try to put together this plan, to be responsible and to really think about the timing, the cost and considerations. So staff's worked tremendously hard on this. Certainly appreciate the recognition thus far.
Good morning, David Rothbart, representing the Southern California Alliance of Publicly Owned Treatment Works. I want to also thank staff for working on this so hard and diligently, and as a member of the steering committee, really appreciate all the effort Lockheed's putting into it. 2 items of feedback. One, kind of something I like repeating, is one inefficiency in the permitting is sort of the haggling over permits, and to have some way of trying to make as much of the requirements as transparent as possible on both sides will make things a lot quicker, and we're more than happy to continue working with Lockheed to try to give some ideas to staff. And the other is just an observation that, at least in my office at the sanitation districts, one of the permit engineers was coming and asking that they were, for the permit backlog, they needed to convert a permit to construct to a permit to operate to address the backlog, and just really wanted to impress upon the board members that, as far as myself and my representatives at SCAP, it's really getting a permit, the permit to construct that's an issue. Once you have a permit to construct, as far as operating that piece of equipment, it's not as critical.
Right.
So there's a lot of effort going into converting from PTCs to PTOs. That may be something you want to look at as far as prioritizing staff efforts. So just some constructive feedback. So thank you very much for everything you do. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Good morning, Bill Pierce of the Boeing Company and a member of the Permit Streamlining Task Force. I also wanted to commend, I mean, when Lockheed told me this plan was coming out, I'm not sure what I would expected, but the depth and the detail that it went into, I mean, it's an ambitious and aggressive plan, and we look forward to working with the district. I know you mentioned a lot of items that the district is working on, but I know in reading through the draft, I mean, there's also front things on the front end where the business community needs to improve a little bit of what they're doing too, which is what I noticed. So that's all going to be part of this package as it goes forward. One of the things I wanted to comment on just briefly, at top of page 7, there's a comment about district is going to, I mean, focus on, I think, expeditiously work on new permit applications and such. And I guess I wanted to see if there might be a little bit of thought given to this issue of Class 1 versus Class 3 permits applications. We tend to do a lot of permit modifications, change the permit conditions, and on a number of occasions they get relegated to a Class 3, which means they get assigned a lower priority. But they're just as critical to us as if we were permitting a brand new piece of equipment. And we've never quite understood how that process works or how that determination is made. But just like maybe give some thought to that as we move forward in this process.
Yeah, and I hope we didn't erroneously give you the wrong impression that Class 3 permits are not important. I think the concept that we pretty much try to telegraph was, if you're a new guy, you know, trying to open a new business, a new dry cleaner, a new auto body shop, well, you are depending on us in issuing the permit, you know, sooner rather than later. And you don't really want to wait even 180 days, even though this is the legally allotted time frame. So we want to make sure that we telegraph that message, that we got that message, and we want to be able to issue those permits as soon as we can, faster rather than later.
Right, but for us, when we see a Class 3 assigned, we might have a new customer to us, but our existing permit doesn't allow a particular coding or process to be utilized, and so we can't move forward with that contract until we have the permit completed. Sure. So just wanted to get, I mean, as the meetings go forward, just some thought given to how that process works.
Sure, sure. It's a very good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joe Hauer. I'm with Rambo and Byron and also Elite Biz Fed. I want to reiterate the thanks comments that a lot of folks have made. I think this sounds like a great effort. And I would like to amplify a little bit David Rothbart's comments about the interpretations and transparency and haggling over permit conditions. It does take a lot of time and often requires you know, many trips up and down the food chain to get things resolved. The AQMD does have policy memos posted on the website. Many of them are old. Some of them are no longer supported by district staff. One example is just what is a change of ownership versus name change. There's several draft documents out there on policies that the district used to use. My understanding is those have been rescinded, but they haven't been replaced. I think it would be helpful to everyone, staff and the regulated community, to get those guidance documents in place and published, and it would save everybody a lot of time, because right now we end up doing this stuff on a retail basis that you could probably do globally. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Julie, to come.
I just was gonna add that one of the efforts, Lockie talked about was updating the permit guidelines or handbook. And so a lot of those policies will get swept into that and updated. And globally across the district, we're looking at all of our policies and procedures, starting from the administrative to a lot of the enforcement, a lot of the permitting, because a lot of them are really old and need to be updated. So that's companion efforts that we're seeing, not just for permitting, but across the agency.
And we're in the last stages of putting together the change of ownership, change of operator guidelines.
That would be
That
great.
is
So
coming
help
out.
is on the way.
That's coming out soon.
I guess when you say you're gonna update the permit handbook, is that the CPP manual or is that an internal district document?
It's an internal district document that we often use to train our internal engineers. But once we do that, and we haven't updated that for, I don't know, 15 years or so, and once we update that, we want to upload it on the web and make it available, to the public as well, so that you know the tools that we use internally, and we both speak, the same language. We are on the same page, and I think it will only help, the transparency, that issue that you were talking about, and customer service.
And
Thank you.
consistency.
Yep.
And consistency.
Yeah, that would be a big help.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Angela Johnson-Mazzaros from Earth Justice, and it just feels like the environmental community ought to comment on this too. And I just want to say we really support this effort, and thank you for bringing these forward. And even though it's not always apparent, I look for opportunities to be supportive when I can. And this is one of those. That's very clearly something that we support. One of the things that we've long been concerned about is when your permitting process takes too long, it may encourage people to move forward without a permit, right? And then they're outside of the system, and that has lots of ramifications on the communities that we are focused on in our work. And so having an efficient and effective permitting system is something that we certainly endorse and look forward to your getting through this backlog and being able to be transparent and clear with people. Clearly, it would be great if we could free up staff time to work on the bigger permits, right? So that those can move forward more quickly also. We believe that those are important. But I do want to raise that there can be a potential downside, right? So I just want to also raise the issue that streamlining is important, but it shouldn't be done to the expense of our overall environmental objectives, right? And it shouldn't be done at the expense of transparency about what people's permits allow them to do or not do, and how it goes into that. So I appreciate the notion of using the website to make things available and to do things like that, and to just remind us all that as we look to move more permits into a more automated process, which I think makes sense, and probably in many areas, that big sources are important, but area sources are important too, right? All those little sources of pollution through the basin. And so I just want to make sure that we are keeping our eye on both of these things: efficiency, effectiveness, not just from the engineering and processing standpoint, but also from the environmental perspective. And so if there is an opportunity for us on the environmental side to also be involved in these conversations, as we are stakeholders too, as this process moves forward, then we will look forward to having those opportunities and appreciate being invited to that table.
Thank you for your comments. That's great input. Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, any other board comments? No, lost Sean.
I just have a question. It just seems to me that, especially with, small pieces of equipment, aren't they all the same? I mean, can't this be standardized on some, maybe not, I wonder what the haggling is about when David Rothbard talks about that. I'm just wondering why.
For the simple equipment, and especially for the equipment that have low or small emission signatures, the answer is yes. And in fact, we made great strides in pushing those towards our filing registration system, which is almost like an over-the-counter permit. They come with pre-arranged conditions, so there's no haggling, and you can get them very fast.
Can you give a specific?
Sure. For instance, small boilers, small engines, the UVB processes that have very low emission signatures, they can go through the registration process very easily. Things start getting trickier when the permit application triggers our new source review thresholds, whether it's for criteria pollutants or toxic air pollutants, and then we have to go case-by-case analysis and figure out what the best available control technology is, and necessitates, to obtain emission reduction credits on the open market. Then things start elongating. But for the simple ones, we have a process, and our goal through this process is to see whether we can push additional equipment into that simplified process. We are cautiously optimistic.
Okay, thank you.
Are you guys looking for some direction as far as the two options at this point, or?
Some feedback will be helpful.
Well, before I give feedback on the really expensive option or the expensive option, I'd like to hear from staff as far as finance. I mean, where would we be if we were to say, hey, let's go gung-ho and go the full route and add on these extra 35 part-time employees? What type of financial impact are we looking at in our general fund?
So the delta between the two on option one is $4.4 million over 2 years, as opposed to about $11 million over a year and a half. $2.2 million a year for 2 years. In year one, we could absorb that within the current budget if the board is adopted. If you went with option two, you would either have to, it's the same options as always, you'd have to go down into the general fund balance. It'd be a significant impact. You'd be looking at $7 million more than the cumulative effect, which would bring our fund balance down considerably. The other option, nobody ever likes to hear this, but I'll say it's always, fee increases to cover those costs. We don't fully recover the cost on permit processing as it is, so we would go further into that hole, which would then naturally bring up the potential fee increases.
Wasn't there another fund available that we could?
So there's, the other option then would be to look to see, are there any special revenue funds that are available that lack restrictions that you otherwise could use to fund a more rapid backlog removal. So that would be the other part of it. There's always one fund that pops into mind that maybe has some less restrictions. I think that money potentially, though otherwise, would be used for system upgrades and things like that that we otherwise don't have funding for either currently. So I answer your question there, Vice Chair?
Close.
But I also wanted to say, those were the costs for the labor, and we also have $1 million a year for 5 years for the IM costs. So it's in addition to the costs Mike was saying, so that just kind of adds another little layer on there.
Right. And the delta between if we went to the higher cost one versus lower only gets us a couple quarters, maybe three quarters. Yeah.
3 at the most, if we are lucky.
Is one more of a guarantee we'll definitely get there if we went to the higher cost, or they both have a lot of gray area, right?
Right.
I think given the effectiveness in terms of bringing people on, the realistic nature in terms of training, getting these programs implemented, I don't believe the 15-month effort is really cost effective. I mean, if you were to ask what's our specific recommendation, we'd go with the 2-year approach, focusing on getting those oldest ones out and trying to become more efficient and take care of the ones as they come in.
And we're spending a lot of money and time in training people that we are not going to have, a year later.
Right.
That's what makes it also adds to the cost and effectiveness.
Yeah, I think scenario one makes more sense. It'd be nice to be able to do it quicker, but I think from an overall standpoint, scenario one is a lot better.
Tend to agree.
I'll move scenario one.
Yeah, it's just an informational.
It's just informational, but
Just
it's good to hear it. That's,
Sean's still there? Do you have any comments, Sean?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. Okay, I guess we'll go on to item 4. It's the, I don't know where you're going, but you're right.
Okay, very briefly, I know we're running out of time. So in response to the comments that the board had received from the Torrance community relative to the use of hydrofluoric acid-based alkylation processes. We had hired Northern Engineering Consultants to do a feasibility assessment for us and do an independent study to evaluate alternatives to the HF process. And the study just got completed this week, and we uploaded that study to our website. It is something that the community is extremely interested. They looked at 7 different alternatives, and I see you, Chairman, you are sifting through the pages there. So I'm not going to go through the details of the study, but just to let you know that the study is available.
Okay, so will this come back later with more recommendations
We'll
to it?
go back, and we'll brief you and the
Okay.
full board if you want with what the findings are.
Let's bring this back here after staff's had more time to go through it and you can give us a full report. Okay. Any other questions? Any public comment on this? All right. On item number 5, summary of proposed amendment to Rule 1302, Tracy Gross.
Mr. Chair, in the interest of time, if I can give you maybe the 30-second version.
Okay.
Because I know the next item we are going to have some public comment.
Okay.
Rule 1325 was adopted in 2011 to implement federal new source requirements for PM 2.5. Earlier this year, the basin was reclassified for PM 2.5 from moderate to serious non-attainment. In addition, recently, the PM 2.5 implementation rule was published by US EPA. So we have a need to update the rule with regards to those 2 actions. And amendments to Rule 1302 are really just administrative in nature and bringing it up for consistency. Just real simple, we're going to be lowering the major source threshold for PM 2.5 from 100 to 70 tons per year. We're going to be adding precursor compounds for VOC and ammonia, setting those thresholds for significant modification at 40 tons per year. We'll also be lowering the significance threshold for 2-year exemption, for the 2-year facility exemption to 70 tons, and that's just to prevent companies from trying to avoid the major source over a 2-year period by phasing their projects. The implementation date will be August 14th or US EPA approval, whichever is later. One of the reasons we're bringing this to you now is so facilities will have ample notification that these requirements will be existing. And then we'll be adding an offset exemption provision to Rule 1325. And as I said, for Rule 1302, we're just going to be making it consistent. Regarding the impacts, we don't expect any facilities to come in that are going to exceed the threshold. If they do, they'll take a potential to emit below the 70, and that's been an example of a couple electrical generating facilities we have in right now that have taken a cap of 69.7 tons. So we don't expect any major sources to come in. Those sources are already going to be subject to BACT, and NOx and SOx as precursors are subject to NSR. So for VOC sources, as a secondary forming pollutant, they're already going to be subject to stringent requirements that we currently have in our rules. For ammonia, we don't expect any sources to come in. There are fugitive source requirements, but the only sources we can think of that might trigger that are dairies, and dairies are specifically excluded under EPA guidance. The offset for regulatory compliance is with respect to what we already have in Rule 1304. It's already provided for under the Clean Air Act, so we're just adding it because this rule is a standalone rule for PM 2.5. So again, we're going to be amending the definition. I'll just skip to the next. We don't expect any significant impacts. We did not receive any comments during our comment period. Any clarifications that we were requested by EPA or the public have already been addressed. We'll be setting the hearing and bringing it to your board on November 4th.
Okay. Any questions? Any public comment? Very good. Let's go ahead and go on to the next one.
Okay. This next rule is really to seek your guidance and bring some things to your attention with regards to our development of Rule 1304.2 and .3. Rule 1304.1, as you know, was adopted for repowering projects to allow them access to offsets within our internal banks. We've found at that time that looked like there was going to be a need for additional power projects to come online that may also need to have offsets. In large part, that's because the San Onofre generating station had been shut down. There's a lot of things going on with grid reliability, resource adequacy, and some of the actions that are being taken at the governor's level that has caused us to look into this. At this time, at that time, it looked like we weren't going to have enough offsets for some of the projects that we thought were going to come online. And since that time, that hasn't really materialized. This is just to show you that we've been working on this for over 2 years. Just real briefly, Rule 1304.2 applies to investor-owned utilities. And those are utilities that are governed by the CPUC. The only independent-owned utility that actually operates in our jurisdiction is Southern California Edison. 1304.3 applies to publicly owned utilities. Those are ones that are like Glendale, Burbank, Riverside, and the like. They have their own approving authority, but they too may require access to our bank. Just real simple, projects are approved, they come to us, they apply, they tell us, they demonstrate that they need the offsets, we set those aside, and those are made available to them upon the permit approval. So the strong demand that we thought of 2 years ago is not yet materialized. CEC still supports these rules as a just in case, just to make sure that we have that availability. Southern California Edison has told us that based on their view, we don't have any need for new gas-fired generation for the next 4 to 6 years. They actually have excess wind power now, and they expect to have excess solar power in the future. The rules are supported by 2 proponents for 1304.2, the Stanton Energy Reliability Center. We have not received the applications for those, but they do anticipate a need for the program. And the city of Glendale for 1304.3 is actually researching their resource adequacy needs, and they may have projects that need to come forward where they may need access to the bank. The rules are generally opposed by the environmental groups, but the potential for demand of NOx ERCs may come out if electrical generating facilities such as LEDWP decide to opt out of the reclaim program. We did have a public workshop on September 7th. The comments that we heard at that meeting is that the grid is evolving. Although the need for the generating capacity has been decreasing, it has not been eliminated. Changes are needed. It may happen really quickly, such as what happened in 2001. It may cause agencies such as ours to react really quickly. Having a permitting mechanism in place already, the debate being done with the rules, allows for these projects to go forward and ensures that the best projects do move forward. So we currently have notice of preparation out for public comment, closes next week, as well as comments from the public workshop. We do have the rules in really good shape at this time, and we are on schedule for a January 6th public hearing. So Phil?
If I can add just a few things. This rule's at a bit of a crossroads. We started a couple years ago because of some pressures of when Song shut down. We had the CEC, PUC, and a lot of the electrical generating facilities saying there's going to be a need for this. And at this point, and we started work 2 years ago, and as we've gone through the working group and you saw the schedule, that pressure seems to have subsided a bit. There are two facilities, they may testify today, that would really like to have access to our internal bank. They would pay for those offsets. At the same time, we're getting comments from environmental groups saying we shouldn't be facilitating the new fossil fuel power plants. And we're at a crossroads because we have a very, very extensive and complicated CEQA document that's going to be required for this rule, looking at a lot of different impacts. So we're just seeking a little bit of committee direction on timing or the need, and maybe there'll be public testimony. And we're ready to move forward because it was on the board calendar and we're preparing, but at the same time, you know, the situation has changed a bit since we started this rulemaking a couple years ago.
All right, public comment?
Good morning. Mike Carroll with Latham & Watkins, and we represent the Stanton Energy Reliability Project and Wellhead Electric, developer of that project. And we would urge the committee to provide direction to staff to continue with the rulemaking process, which they're obviously already well into. You know, the two justifications that I've heard in some of the working group meetings in terms of not moving forward with the project, and Dr. Fund mentioned them just now, are that these are gas-fired projects. We're moving to a new energy paradigm that relies more on renewable resources. Why develop a rule to facilitate natural gas-fired projects that are part of the old paradigm? And while it is very true that the paradigm has shifted more to renewables, part of that paradigm is smaller, flexible, strategically located gas-fired generation to support those renewables. So that paradigm shift is why you're not seeing any more 5, 6, 7, 800 megawatt natural gas projects. But that new paradigm does include smaller 90 megawatt projects like the Stanton Energy Reliability Project that are specifically there to level off the intermittency of the renewable resources. So while on its face it looks like gas-fired old, it's really gas-fired new. The other reason that has been provided is that it doesn't seem like there's as much demand, and I would suggest that that's a perception based on where we are in the process. The Stanton Energy Reliability Project was awarded a contract through a competitive bidding process with SCE, and that's the project that won the contract. That's why we're the only ones that are here. So when you come to a working group meeting, there's only one person sitting there advocating for the rule, and so that seems like, well, gee, maybe we don't need this rule anymore because there isn't much demand. The demand hasn't changed. We all, the RFO was for a certain amount of megawatts, but when there were 12 or 15 people that thought they might be the project, they were all there. Obviously, now that the project has been selected, the other 12 or 15 aren't showing up. So the demand for the rule is the same as it was in terms of satisfying that procurement, which was authorized by the CPUC based on a need for gas-fired generation in this area. And so I think it's just a matter of perception that I'm sort of the only one at the working group meetings raising my hand, but we really think the demand is there, and we just think it's prudent to have the rule in place in advance of when it's needed, as opposed to scrambling and rushing and trying to do something at the moment that it's needed, and just to sort of plan in advance. So we would urge you to direct staff to continue the process that's been underway. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Ramona Boy, Chief Assistant General Manager for the City of Glendale, one of the utilities in support of this rule. And we appreciate the effort that's been taken by the staff. It's been helpful. So GWP, or Glendale Water Powers, we're looking at repowering our old power plant called the Grayson Power Plant. So that plant is about 70 years old, so we're trying to modernize it and really put better control technology. But due to the size of the plant, or say repower, we're looking at about a 250 megawatt, which is what we currently have. So we are concerned that our needs combined with those other new generators, that we may not be able to meet all our demands through the through the reduction credit, the emission reduction credit market. So although we're in support of this, we are going to submit some comments. We will make sure that we utilize everything that we can through the open market before we rely on the reserves. But we are still concerned that may not be enough available in order to support a project. In terms of timing, we advise staff that we will be coming with our permit in probably about early spring, and we'd like to get our permit approved and received by sometime in 2018. So again, appreciate staff's effort, and we are in support of this new one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Angela.
Good morning. I'm still Angela Johnson-Mazares from Earth Justice. And I am here speaking on behalf of a coalition of clean air advocates we talked about this morning that includes CCAEJ, Coalition for Clean Air, Communities for a Better Environment, Earth Justice, ECRs for Environmental Justice, Natural Resources Defense Council, Physicians for Social Responsibility Los Angeles, and Sierra Club. So I understand that we're short of time, but I want to make three comments about this. And so first, I just want to raise that generally, rules that come before this board are about how you're going to reduce air pollution. But this is a rule that's about how, in fact, you're going to increase air pollution by allowing these power plants to access this bank and therefore be emitting pollution that wouldn't may not be emitted otherwise. And so I think that that means that the board has a special obligation to pause before moving forward with this and think about the policy direction that the board is taking. So we think that as the board thinks about this, one of the things at the forefront ought to be what can you do to tip the equation toward a clean air solution and away from an emitting solution. And that's what the water folks did, right? When they said no more once-through cooling. They put in place a regime that tipped the decision-making toward figuring out how to not bring water through those plants, right? And here we're saying, think about the policy, about whether or not in our future we're looking to fossil-based solutions or alternatives. So, and I also want to raise something that I think is really important, and I think was frankly unclear from the staff's report. The need to address songs has been addressed already by this PUC. They've done a full rulemaking around that. They've already determined what energy resources were needed in order to meet the songs going offline issue. In their 2012 process, they had tracks 1 and 4. Sadly, I could talk about this for hours. I will try not to. But suffice it to say, they've already closed a decision-making process in which they felt that they determined what was needed to meet the shutdown of songs and also went through cool. The current LTPP process, the immediately preceding LTP process was recently closed. And now they're on a new process. And in that process, when they closed the last process, what they said was it wasn't clear that there was a need to procure more energy resources in the out to 2024 timeframe. So there is not an imminent need for power plants. That's before anybody. It's not before the PUC, and it's certainly not something that's here before this board. And the thing that they're going to focus on in the new proceeding is how do you integrate these renewables? And so as was mentioned, what everyone sees in the future is there's going to be more renewable resources than they can absorb right now. And what that means, as a matter of fact, is moving to storage and other kinds of solutions. And so Mr. Carroll was here, and he's always awesome, and I always appreciate his comments. And so he talked about the need for having fossil to level off, right, and having fossil to support these renewables. But the fact of the matter is that we're moving forward past that, and storage is now a viable option that wasn't true back when they were considering, for example, the Stanton's project. And just to illustrate that, I just want to wave in front of you, and I'm happy to get copies of this to anyone. So in 2015, this is the Orange County Register announcing the adoption of songs, and it says, "Not yet comfortable with batteries, Edison hopes to get electricity from new plant in Stanton." So in 2015, right? And there was a whole activity that happened at the PUC. And the PUC set a limit, SCE set a limit of 100 megawatts of storage because of this concern about this newfangled storage activity, right? And this PUC determined that that was reasonable given what they didn't know about how they were going to use storage. But now you fast forward to way into 2016, right? And now SCE is having a new grid edge experiment where they just contracted for 125 megawatts of batteries and demand response in Orange County, right? Where this power plant was proposed. And so the fact of the matter is the technology is evolving rapidly. And the technology is evolving to be clean as compared to fossil. And so that takes me back to my opening comment. This is about the policy that the board is going to set. And so if you signal that we're good with fossil, then that's what you're more likely to get. But if you signal that we're not good with that, then you don't get that. And really, given the timeframes that everyone has agreed are at stake here, acting now sends the wrong signal, and you've got plenty of time to act later should there be a need to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commenters?
All right.
Comments, questions?
I don't have any questions.
Any comments?
Well, wait, I may have a question. There was a concern when songs went down, and that concern was grid reliability.
Yes.
And there were discussions between San Diego Gas and Electric and Edison in our area because there were gaps along that grid. And can one of you explain to me, maybe Tracy, what's happening with that issue?
Well, Tom might be able to add on that, but my understanding is that they've still just been in the discussion phase and nothing has ever come out of that. It's still far off in the future.
But CEC and CPUC, they are looking at this issue, and they do have a multi-pronged solution, and they are relying, there are some new plans that will be coming in. There will be some AES, Huntington Beach, for instance. There is some spinning capacity that is going to be installed in South Orange County,
Right.
northern San Diego County, that may address some of the grid reliability and voltage fluctuation issues. There is also some infrastructure improvement. They are trying to connect the desert and the renewable energies through new power lines down to the southwest Bay Area of our region. So in theory, and there is the storage capacity that that Angela was referring to. Some of those projects are moving forward. In fact, we have been in discussions with Edison, and they have some additional projects. So in theory, if all these projects move together and on schedule, and all of the planets and stars will align, we won't have any issues, and most likely won't need to use any of those rules that we are developing. But the question is the what if, and do we need to have some insurance in case things don't move, the way they're supposed to be moving, and we experience shortage in our demand, in our electricity supply. And that's what the rules are trying to address, to provide that insurance.
And just to emphasize, the rules are structured such as this is a last resort. The facilities would have to go out on the open market to try to find the offsets first. It would have to be part of the procurement plan. It would have, there's safeguards against just, more extra capacity that wasn't absolutely needed. We did that within the rule to the best extent we can. We're not saying these projects can't move forward. They still have the option of finding offsets on the open market. And I know that's difficult, but that's still there. And you can always find a project to get offsets. Either way, they would be paying for them one way or the other, because even the access to our internal bank would come with a fee. So I would just suggest, that there could be another option here, that if there are a couple short-term projects that, are really stuck, they're contracted, whatever, we could work into the rule that, just a provision to handle this immediate need, which is not a huge amount of offsets, but not send that long-term signal that Angela talked about, that it's an open door for this going forward. That might mean we have to revisit the rule in the future if the situation changes, but it might get us through. So there's kind of a third option there if you want to consider it between full, let's put this on hold 100% or move forward 100%.
So, and if they use our offset bank, they have to surrender those offsets when they no longer need them?
That's correct.
Yes.
Can I just offer one point of clarification with respect to STAMP? There's been a lot of discussion about, the SONGS problem has been solved, and I agree with that, but just remember that the Stanton project was part of that. So the Stanton project contract was awarded and approved a long time ago, so that's part of the solution. It just hasn't been permitted yet. So this is not for some future need. This is to address the SONGS problem. I also point out that the new procurement for energy storage that Angela referred to was issued on an emergency basis by the CPUC to respond to the shutdown of the Aliso Canyon facility, because there are concerns about having enough gas to meet reliability needs. And that's a perfect illustration about how fast things can change and why it's good to have things in place to deal with that, as opposed to waiting and trying to do something then.
Phil, could you clarify on the 100% hold, 100% forward? There's no.
I mean, there could be a way, and it would simplify the secret document entirely, either call out a couple projects by name, or to put a limit on the amount that we would allow in our internal bank, or a time frame as to which they would be, allowable for a year. But if these projects come through and they're done, they're in, and then beyond that, we'd have to come back. So there are some ways to move forward if the arguments for these couple projects are hold weight. But again, we're seeking committee direction.
If I can add one more variable here that you should be aware is something that greatly is impacting the demand and supply balance in our grid is the once-through cooling requirement that the Water Board has come up with that necessitates the retirement of some older plants and replacement with some new ones. CEC and CPUC, they are seriously considering going back to the Water Board and trying to convince them to perhaps defer and delay the implementation of those requirements so that some of the existing plants can continue producing power just in case we have a shortage. But we are not the ones pulling those levers, and neither are those two agencies. It's the Water Board who will have to make the decision. And we don't want to be in a situation where, as a local air quality agency, are holding the bag in case the lights start flickering.
We don't want to be blamed for brownouts or blackouts because of these issues. But again, we've heard these arguments through the working groups, and staff is pretty agnostic on this. We just want to get a little bit of direction on which way to go.
I think it makes sense for us to proceed with the direction we're headed.
The existing direction.
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's a last resort. It is kind of like
It is,
insurance
mhm.
policy. It's, by having the rule in place doesn't mean they're gonna use it.
Exactly.
But it gives,
And they have to demonstrate that they need the
They need
offsets, that
that.
they could not acquire them.
there's some safeguards built into our process.
Yes.
So I would go ahead and approve this for send up to the board.
Yeah. Yes, just information. Sean, do you have any comments?
No, thank you.
I guess I have a comment before we run. Philip, I sort of like your named options where we're naming the projects. I guess that's where I feel more comfortable. So I think that needs to be one of the options as we bring this forward. Some sort of other way to encapsulate this. And that's just, if we can make that an option to bring to the board, great, and talk about it there.
Okay, and that's something we can use as SQL alternatives perhaps. So yeah, we can work on
Sure.
work on that.
Okay. All right. When's this item coming before the board? Is this
October.
Okay.
I'll go as
And try it.
quickly.
Come on.
So, by way of background, we came to the Station Resource Committee in July. We have updated, made some revisions, received about 11 comment letters, did additional analysis, and that's what I'm gonna present to you today. Public process, we've had a series of working group meetings, for this, amendment to, reclaim for the, NOx shutdown provision. It's gonna come to the board in October 2016. 11 comment letters received. Some folks submitted multiple comment letters. A number of key issues that were raised, and I'll go over each of those issues. We made some changes to the proposal and then provided additional analysis to demonstrate where we didn't feel that there was a need to make any changes and where we wanted to hold the line. So the first issue that was raised is in regards to the applicability. Should we have an applicability threshold for the NOx shutdown provision? Staff did some additional analysis looking at the total market. We're recommending that the shutdown provision apply to the largest facilities, so facilities in Table 7 and 8. We looked at the facilities that are the non-Table 7 and 8 facilities. Table 7 and 8 represents about 90% of the holdings. The other facilities, when we look at them on average, their holdings are about 5 tons per year. You would need about 40 shutdowns to make up the difference if you're looking at a refinery or a facility in Table 7 and 8, they need about 200 tons per year on average as you look in post-2022 to make up that difference. We also looked at, in terms of facilities and their emissions in these non-Table 7 and 8 facilities. There's 9 facilities that have emissions over 20 tons per year, but their holdings are about 70% lower than their emissions. So even if those larger facilities were to shut down, their impact in terms of delaying BART would be very minimal, if anything. So we received a comment in regards to, there's a provision in the proposal that requires a facility upon shutdown that they, even if they sold their RTCs, their future RTCs, their infinite year block RTCs, that we would still require them to provide RTCs to make up that balance. And so the comment was that they should be excluded. We looked at the Table 7 and 8 facilities. We identified only one facility that would kind of fall into this category, that they sold the IYB RTCs. That one facility, if they were to look at what their emissions are and what they would need to provide, it would be less than 0.5% of just the holdings in Table 7 and 8. So in terms of them going out into the open market and having to purchase just a lot of RTCs, no, that's not the situation. If you were to look at the whole market, that 0.5% becomes an even smaller percentage. So the impact would be insignificant in regards to the amount of RTCs that the facility would need to provide, and then the number of facilities that that particular provision would affect. So we believe we should just maintain that provision. At the July Station Resource Committee, the issue of the same ownership was presented to you, where we had this 6-digit NAICS code. We received a series of comments that that was too restrictive. We went back to look at how EPA defines same ownership and took some of the key parts of that. We're going to include, or we have included in the proposal, for facilities that share the same board of directors or same parent company, corporation, that would define the same ownership. And then we've also added some elements in terms of the facilities need to make a declaration of the facilities that are within the same ownership 30 days after the rule is amended. And then we also added a provision that once they are to provide these RTCs to their same ownership facilities, that those RTCs from the shutdown facility become non-tradable. So then another issue that came up was, and it was from a variety of different stakeholders, that the proposal should allow any reductions or any emissions that are below the BACT level, that we should provide a credit when we're looking and doing the calculation. And so when we compare command and control to the reclaim program doesn't give that credit. We're not giving a credit. We're not deducting. We're neutral on that. So staff wants to hold the line on that proposal. In practice, it's like what the bigger delta is going to be someone that's not at BACT and going down to BACT. The differential between this kind of new BACT and somebody that would be at BACT, the differential is going to be generally very small. You're going to look at between 4 and 5 ppm. So what they're not getting is not going to be really all that much in terms of a credit. And then if you were to look at a facility that's all below BACT, it just wouldn't make sense to us to say, when you shut down, we're going to give you some RTCs. So you know, that type of thought process to us just didn't make sense. So we felt we would just maintain that provision, hold the line, added clarity in the rule that we wouldn't give any credit for anything below BACT. Another comment came up in regards to can the proposal incorporate the allowance of selling discrete RTCs during 2 time periods. One time period being when a facility is in kind of this temporary shutdown period, either they're short of feedstock, so they need to shut down their operations, or maybe there's an economic issue, or they could be just retooling their facility. And so during that time period, can they sell RTCs? And we said yes, they can. They can sell within that same compliance year. They couldn't sell any infinite year block RTCs during that time period. The other time that we would allow these discrete selling of RTCs is when we determine a facility is shutting down and the time period that we deduct the RTCs. And until that time period, until we make that final decision of we're going to deduct X amount, we would allow them to sell just the discrete year RTCs. And so this wouldn't affect the what our overall concern is in terms of the infinite year blocks and someone getting a long-term stream of credits just in those certain years. Another comment that we received is in regards to incorporating a process for identifying facility shutdowns. We incorporated this a process. We also included criteria instead of a list of situations where it would not be deemed a shutdown. We added criteria for permanent emission reductions that would be associated with any type of pollution control or over control that a facility did, and we see this big drop in emissions. Where there's a temporary emission reduction type of from economic, or they're retooling, the same types of things where we're referring to this as the planned non-operational shutdown situations. At the last Station Resource Committee, Dr. Liu had asked us about how the proposal would fare if Cal Portland were subject to it. So the proposal as it is, we're not going back retroactively, but if Cal Portland was operating, you know, and if they were to shut down and we had this, the proposed amendments, what would that mean? And so what we did was we looked at the emissions from Cal Portland. We applied the same methodology that the proposed rule is proposing. The BACT adjustment for Cal Portland, based on their type of equipment, would be about a 80% reduction in terms of the adjustment. And then we assumed that their holdings would be equal to their just adjusted initial allocation, and I'll show you how that makes sense. So as we look at Cal Portland, and the blue bars are their emissions, the orange line represents their holdings, and their holdings were pretty much following what their emissions were. So their holdings were very tight to their adjusted initial allocation. So we just assumed, for the purpose of this analysis, that if we were to look at their holdings in the future, that their holdings would have followed that initial adjusted allocation, the purple dashed line. And so if we use the same methodology, what we would deduct from them beginning in 2010 would be 1.4 million pounds of NOx RTC holdings. And so in the beginning years, we wouldn't be deducting, it wouldn't be a full forfeiture. But as the as the deduction amount, which is the 1.4 million, starts to cross over their holdings, which is what we're assuming to be the purple line, in 2016, at that point, the adjusted initial allocation becomes the max that we would deduct. So beginning in 2016, they would have no more holdings left over. Another comment that I believe Dr. Liu had brought up is that the proposal does not require 100% forfeiture of RTCs upon shutdown. And so we did some additional analysis to better understand what this would mean under the current proposal. So for example, in the Cal Portland scenario, it's in the beginning years, they would still have holdings of RTCs based on the deduction methodology. So what we did was we looked at all the Table 7 and 8 facilities, and then we excluded refineries, utilities, and natural gas providers because in our view, those are the ones that would be less likely to be the ones that would be shutting down from that group of facilities. And then what we did was we identified 6 facilities that if they were to shut down, that they would have potential holdings that they would have. And the total amount for those 6 facilities was 200,000 pounds per year of RTCs, which represents about 5.5% of what would be needed. It wouldn't be enough to allow someone to avoid installation of BARC. So even though the proposal doesn't require full forfeiture, and they would still have holdings, the amount of holdings, and if you were to assume all 6 facilities shut down, is really not going to make that difference of where our concern would be in terms of avoiding future controls. This is just the comparison for the proposed provision and command and control. That was another request that was part of the motion, that we look at that and we try to align the proposal to that. Both command and control and the proposal will have a discount. New source review discounts to a BACT level. We're discounting to a BARC level. There's no credit for equipment that goes beyond BACT under new source review, and there's no credit for equipment that goes beyond BARC under the current proposal. The command and control and new source review is on an equipment basis. This proposal is on a facility-wide basis. The basis of the shutdowns were both rely on past years emissions data and takes an average. One takes average of 2 years actual. We're taking average of 2-year actuals based on the past 5 years of emissions. So we had a working group meeting in late August. We presented pretty much what I'm presenting to you today. And so staff at this point is not aware of any key issues, any remaining key issues. We've addressed it either through amendments or through the additional analysis provided to the stakeholders. And so we're ready for October.
Okay. Any public comment? Couple.
Just real briefly, because I've talked to some board members about this and not everyone, but I want to express our appreciation of the staff for the work they did on this. I thought it was a very open and collaborative process, a lot of back and forth. We had an excellent meeting where the issues kind of bubbled to the surface. I submitted a comment letter and the staff addressed all but one of my comments to my satisfaction, and that one issue doesn't affect any of my members, so I'm not going to die on that battlefield. So I just want to, again, it was we really appreciate the process that was followed from where we were in December to where we are now is like night and day, and it was a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Keep it quick. I have a supervisor in the desert that's on me.
I'll be quick. I also want to thank Susan and her team. I think we've come a long ways. There's a lot of good things. I think I've just got 2 brief comments. Still concerned about the 1304 offsets being deducted. That process also happens with command and control emission reduction credits. It's very complex. It's almost completely non-transparent. It takes a lot of staff time. So I would still urge that be removed, understanding that may not happen. The other thing is in looking at I-12, one way to read it would still prohibit the sale of the RTCs after all these deductions are applied, and it would be nice to just make that a little clearer, and we could make some specific suggestions. That's all. Thank you.
I wasn't going to speak, but just after Kurt's speech, or comments, I just want to make one point. Mike Carroll, Latham & Watkins for the Regulatory Flexibility Group. We agree that this is a substantial improvement over some of the earlier proposals. I just don't want to leave you with the impression that the regulated industry is happy with this amendment. I mean, the only way that credits flow into the reclaim program is through shutdowns. There's a Rule 2008 that was adopted when the reclaim program was first created that contemplated credits coming in from mobile sources. That's never happened. So the only inputs into this program are from the shutdowns of facilities. And of course, there are lots of outputs as new facilities come in. So again, I'm not here to necessarily oppose this, but I just wanted to clarify that our strong preference as the regulated industry would be that there not be any shutdown provisions in the rule, although we do agree that what is on the table now is a significant improvement over some of the previous proposals. Thanks.
Comments, board members? Nothing? Sean? Everyone good?
I'm good.
All right, let's bring it to the board.
I'm good.
All right. Our last item is talking to Kurt. It's Kurt's item. We go ahead and move this to next month's.
Yeah.
Is that all right with everybody?
Yes.
All right. Attached are some written reports. I believe that brings us to any other public comments, just in general? Nope. Okay. Thank you. On the technology.